our first citizen science lecture of the year. Two things really quick before we go. If anybody is not on our email list and you want to be, I have a sign-up sheet in the back. Key Challenge students, I have a sign-up sheet for you too, so make sure you sign in so you get credit. Today we have Denise Trejo. She's a biologist and environmental educator with the Miami Seaquarium. And the Seaquarium, as you know, aside from the interesting attractions and everything they have there, they also do a lot of rehab and rescue with stranded and injured manatees and sea turtles. And she is going to talk to us today about that. So Denise, I'll let you have it.
Thank you. I'm Denise. I'm the education specialist at Miami Seaquarium. And today I'm going to talk to you about all of the conservation efforts that we do at Miami Seaquarium. So we do something really awesome that is called rescue and rehab. And you might already have an idea what we do, but I'm going to talk a little bit about it. So what are the animals that we rescue, rehabilitate, and release? Manatees and sea turtles. I'm going to talk a little bit about each one, and then we're going to go through the threats that they face out there in the wild, and then how we can help them, and how you can help them. So manatees are marine mammals. And what does that mean? So that means that they have hair, they are warm-blooded, they breathe air with lungs, they drink milk from their mothers, just like us. So they usually stay in warm, shallow waters where they have plenty of food. So they really like to eat plants. They are vegetarians, and so they love seagrass. And that is usually around rivers, estuaries, bays, canals, coastal waters, fresh water, and salt water. So they can be found everywhere. Manatees are threatened. So they are considered a threatened species. They are not an endangered species anymore. So that happened last year. So that is both, in my opinion, good and bad. It's really good because their numbers are growing, so all of the conservation efforts are working. But also, that means that maybe they won't receive as much funding or as much care as they need to keep on growing in numbers. They are protected, however, by the Endangered Species Act and under the Marine Mammal Protection Act. So they are protected against the harassment, hunt, capture, or kill, whether that is an actual thing or just the attempt. And actually, if you break these laws, you can get fined for a lot of money or even face jail time. Why are they threatened? They have natural threats, but there are not a lot of them. They actually don't have natural predators. So their threats in the wild could be cold stress and red tide. So cold stress, they look like they have a lot of blubber, like they have a lot of body fat, but they actually don't. They just have really large organs. And especially their digestive system is very, very large, and they need that to digest all of the seagrass they eat. So if they, for some reason, are found in a cold water, they can get hypothermia. And they get, basically, they can't move. They start struggling very much. And the red tide, that is an unusual growth of algae that has a toxic effect on a lot of species, among that the manatees. And so they get affected in the nervous system. But unfortunately, they do suffer and they have a lot of human-related threats. The number one being boats. So they can get injured by boats in two ways. The first one is that they can get caught by boat propellers. And the second one is that they can get broken bones by getting hit by the hull of or the bottom of the boat. that is not the only thing that boats do. They can also destroy seagrass beds. And that's really bad because they can take a very long time to regrow. And manatees eat a lot of food. So they really need their food sources to stay pristine. Pollution. So they're very curious. So they tend to go and try to find out what they see. And if they see like some trash in the water, they will go to it, and sometimes they can get entangled. And it can also get them to get cut or injured. Pollution kills the seagrass, because if you think, what does plants need in order to grow? They need sunlight, right? But if you think of a lot of pollution in the ocean, that pollution prevents the sunlight from entering the water. And so it's very hard for the seagrass to grow in those conditions. Also, manatees, just like us, they need to drink fresh water. But if that water is dirty, they cannot drink it. They can get very, very sick from it. Raise your hand if you've ever eaten a plastic bag. No? If you've ever eaten a plastic bag. No? You've never eaten a plastic bag? No? Well, do you think you'll feel sick if you ate one? Right? Yes. So that's what happened to a lot of animals in the wild. Harassment. Sometimes people have good intentions, but those good intentions translate in a threat for wild animals. So harassment is defined as any activity that changes the manatee's natural behavior, or any wild animal. Poaching, poking, or riding manatees is considered harassment. Feeding manatees and giving them water is also harassment. And so sometimes, well, we're very lucky. Here in Miami, we have a lot of wildlife right in our backyard. So it's not uncommon for us to feed or give water to these animals. A lot of people think they're doing a good thing, but instead they are preventing them from migrating. And so by giving them water, they stay in one place instead of traveling around as they're supposed to. Well, these activities can disrupt the manatee's migratory pattern and or cause the separation of mother and calf. So that is why it's considered harassment. Well, poaching. That is not very common in these days, but it still happens. And so they cannot be legally killed, but that doesn't prevent people from still doing it. Well, now we're going to talk about sea turtles. We are also very lucky, and you, as the Key Biscayne community, you are very, very lucky to have mostly 3 species of sea turtles that come to your backyard every year to lay their eggs. And so they do face a lot of threats, and we're going to talk a little bit about them. So sea turtles are reptiles. They breathe air with their lungs. They are cold-blooded or ectothermic. That is one characteristic that is different from us. They have scales, and they lay eggs. Do you lay eggs? No? You can't? No? So they are also an endangered species. All species of sea turtles found in the US waters are endangered. There are 7 species of sea turtles in the world. Here in Florida waters, we can find 5 of them. So that is pretty amazing. They are protected by the Endangered Species Act, and that prohibits the taking. And the taking is what we were discussing with the manatees. Anything that can harm them. So we cannot touch them, harass them, feed them, or disrupt their habitat. But do we really stick to those rules? Not always, right? We can also get fined or face jail if we break these laws. Well, threats to sea turtles. Unlike the manatees, sea turtles face a very, very large number of natural threats. Predators, they do have natural predators, and actually a lot of them. It can be crabs, ants, raccoons, foxes, hogs, shorebirds, fish or sharks, and even killer whales. That makes it very, very difficult for them to reach adulthood. So maturity is a very rare thing for a sea turtle. 1 in 1,000 of them reach maturity, and that is not very likely, right? So they also get some sickness, and without medical attention, they could die from them. So unfortunately, because all of the pollutants that we have put in the water, they can grow these kind of tumors that are called fibropapilloma. And although they can be removed, the sea turtle would have to get to a rescue center like us in order to get them removed. But once they're removed, they live perfectly fine and happy. And very often they can be released back into the wild. And like if that wasn't enough, they also face a lot of human-related threats. Pollution is one of them. So they very often mistake trash for food. And so if you were a sea turtle, could you be able to tell the difference between, let's say, a plastic bag or a jellyfish? It kind of look like the same. So they don't have a notion of things that are not edible. So for them, it's all food. And that can harm them because they can get a false sense of being full. But instead of getting all the nutrients they need, they get very malnourished. And also because, as we were talking, if you eat a plastic bag, I don't think that's something that will make you feel good. All the contrary. So, and they also absorb all the toxins from these pollutants, and that makes them very, very sick. Also, they face entanglement in all of this pollution. It's not unusual to get entangled in fishing line, for example, or plastic bags, or that is a very common example, to get entangled in the six-pack rings, right? So that is something that happens very often. And that can disrupt their natural swimming patterns, that they can get caught on things and then maybe even drown. Or they can grow deformities. Let's say they get entangled on one flipper, then do you think it will grow properly? Not really. Boat strikes. We see a lot of these in the Seaquarium, unfortunately. So they can get hit by propellers or engines, and that can that can cut or severely injure their spine or carapace. So after the presentation, you can approach and you can see all of our artifacts. But as you can see here, the sea turtles have their spine attached to the carapace. So basically, it is very, very important for them to keep their carapace intact. They can get trauma for the boat impact, and that the boat impact can form bubbles in their shells. Sometimes when they get to a rescue facility, the veterinarians are able to take out those bubbles, but sometimes it's very hard. So if you think of a sea turtle having a bubble in their shell, do you think they could be able to dive? No. Not really. It's like they are wearing a life vest all of the time. But tell me something, how do you think they sleep? In the surface? they dive. And sometimes they can stay down there for a very, very long time, like 4 or 5 hours. Also, how do they eat? Do they eat in the surface of the water? No. So basically, if they cannot dive, can they survive? And they are more exposed to predators, basically. So it's not good for them to have bubbles in their shells. Beach activity. So raise your hand if you enjoy going to the beach. I really do. Raise your hand if you've ever seen a sea turtle nest in the beach. Very good. But here in the village of Key Biscayne, you're very good to sea turtles, and you try and keep them, you feel them on your own, and you try to keep them safe. But not everywhere is like that, unfortunately. So sometimes people can disrupt the sea turtles. For example, when they are laying their eggs, or for example, their nests. Sometimes they just want to find out what's in there. Or sometimes, even like, for example, we make holes or sand castles. And if you think of a sea turtle like a little hatchling, that means a baby, they're really, really little. And they have a really long way until they reach the ocean. But if you think you're a tiny sea turtle and you encounter a huge hole in the sand before you reach the ocean, are you going to make it or not really? It's going to be hard, right? Or even pollution left behind. So sometimes we don't take everything we bring with us back into our homes, or we don't properly dispose it, and so they can get entangled, or they can think it's food and eat it. Bycatch. Have you ever heard this word before? No? Okay, so raise your hand again if you enjoy seafood. But sometimes our love for seafood is not so good for the animals that live in the ocean, because we have unsustainable fishing practices. So that means that we fish a lot more than we need. And so because of our love for seafood, fishermen or like fishing companies, they have developed really, really harmful fishing practices. So for example, if you think, sometimes what they do in the boat is that they throw a net, just like you see, that is really heavy, and that falls all the way into the bottom of the ocean. And they drag it with everything that's found in between, from the bottom up. So do you think they only catch whatever they want to catch? No. Sometimes they catch dolphins, sea turtles, they damage coral reefs, and a dolphin or a sea turtle, do they breathe down there? No. They need air, so sometimes they can drown, and they won't make it. But there's something we can do about that. We can choose sustainable seafood, and that is very important. So, for example, you can say, you can go to the webpage that is called Sustainable Seafood Watch. And then there you can learn about which seafood is sustainable and won't be harming wildlife, and which one is a no-no. Another threat is hunting. So does that happen here? Do you think that happens here? Sometimes it does, but thankfully not as often as in other parts of the world. So people hunt sea turtles because they want their meat or their eggs, their shells or leather. Some people find really, really cool to own sea turtle shells, to put them as or display them at home. Do you think that's cool? No. Not really. it is illegal in most countries, but there are some countries that still allow it. And so that is definitely not cool. Well, bright lights. I think this is really sensible right now because where we live and where we are, so hatchlings use the light of the moon shining on the ocean to find their way from their nest into the beach. But if you have a beach house and you leave all of the lights on all of the night and you're a little sea turtle, you just came out of your nest, and so which way is brighter, the ocean or your place? Your place, very good. And is that good? No. What will happen to them?
Follow the light.
Exactly, and then will they ever reach the ocean?
No.
Not really. And so they get confused basically. If they get confused, they can get dehydrated, they can get hit by cars, picked off by predators. That is very, very common. Or stepped on by people. Exactly. So global warming and storm surge. Have you ever heard those words? Yes? Which one?
Global warming.
Global. So you're going to tell me what global warming is. You in the back.
It's melting polar ice caps, so it's raising water level.
Very good. But why are those ice caps melting?
Because the world is getting too hot.
Very good, exactly. So as you said, the sea level rise, and that translates into loss in beach space for sea turtles to lay their eggs. Also, the eggs can drown from storm surge. That happened this summer, right here. Do you know when? Some, and then even before, do you remember a really bad storm that we had before Irma also? No, so this summer. But yeah, that happened twice on this season. And unfortunately, we can't afford to lose any eggs. So, if I tell you that the sea turtle gender, if they're boys or girls, is determined by the temperature of the nest, will you believe me?
Yeah.
Well, yes. So if the nest is warmer, they're all going to be girls. And if it's cooler, they're all going to be boys. So basically, if we are getting warmer as a planet, are we going to have more boys or girls?
Girls.
Girls. And do you think we can only have girl sea turtles?
No.
No. Exactly, so that's not good. Well, so now that you know about manatees and sea turtles, and what threats they face in the wild, we're going to talk a little bit about the efforts that we at Miami Seaquarium do to help them. So even before we opened our doors in 1955, we started rescuing manatees. In our statement that was made in 1945, we stated one of the things that we said is that we wanted to help animals in the ocean. It doesn't matter if it was a manatee or a sea turtle or any other animal. So the first manatee we rescued was called Mamie, and she was an orphan, so just a baby. And so basically, some people maybe find an injured manatee or sea turtle, and so what do? Do they try and bring it into inland by themselves? No? What do? They call us, or the government, and the government calls, and then do I go by myself? No? Yes, exactly. So there's a team that is a lot of people that, so basically, is it teachers? No? To rescue a manatee? Yeah? What do you think who should come to a manatee rescue? A veterinarian, very good. What else? Yes?
Animal rescuers, like
very good.
specialists.
Very good. So specialists, veterinarians, what else? People that know how to swim or dive? Yes. So there's a really big team that goes out in a tiny little car or in a big, big truck. In a big truck, and they go out in that big truck, and they put that manatee in the truck, and they bring it to us. Well, we bring it to us. And so basically, we assess the animal, so we make sure we evaluate what's wrong with him or her, and then we cure it. And so sometimes they are just a little bit hungry and they just need to gain a little bit of weight. And sometimes they need surgery, sometimes they need critical care. So Miami Seaquarium is one out of 3 facilities in the whole state that is for critical care of manatees. And that is really important. So when one manatee or sea turtle is really and badly injured, we are the first place they call if it's around here, because our team is very, very good in rescuing them. And so after they are rescued and we know what they have and why they are sick, they go through rehabilitation. So that is a big word. What does that mean? Yes? You in the front? Exactly. So we make them better. We're kind of like a hospital for them. And so we make them better. And that is, the process of getting better is called rehabilitation. And so if they need to gain weight, well, we feed them. If they need a surgery, we perform it. And whatever they need is what we do. And then, do we keep them? No?
Yes.
Why not? Very good. So they need to go back in the wild. But do you think all of them can go back? No. What if they, well, okay, so let's say we have a sea turtle with a very, very large bubble in their shell. And after all of the efforts of the veterinarians, they couldn't take the bubble out. Do we decide if they stay or go?
Yes.
No. So we call the government and we tell them, listen, so we have this sea turtle. We don't think it's going to be able to survive out there in the wild, but can you come and take a look? And so they come, they take a look, and they assess whether it's feasible for that animal to survive out there or not. And if they find that they can survive, then it's a go. We release them. And if they feel like, maybe let's wait a little bit more, or maybe he or she should become a permanent resident. So that means that after all of the efforts, they wouldn't be able to survive by themselves out there in the wild. But do you think we release a lot or very, very little? Animals? A lot, yes, exactly. So that is one release. Do you see the manatee here? Yes, can you see it? Very good.
That's a sea turtle.
So this is a video that is going to play in 10 seconds. And it's going to talk a little bit more about all of the animals that we rescue and release. That's the truck.
Miami Seaquarium has been open over 60 years now, and we've been caring for animals during that entire time. And a very important component of caring for animals is the rescue, rehabilitation, and release of wild animals that come into our facility in need of care. Many people ask you, well, what exactly is the 3 R's, as we call them, the rescue, rehabilitation, and release of animals? And it really varies, and it can vary from an individual calling us on a stranded turtle on the beach to bringing that animal in and growing it up, all the way to rescues that involve planes and trains and having to fly to other countries or states and bring animals back to their rehabilitation. We have a group of individuals that are designated specifically for the rescue and rehabilitation and release of animals. Now, this is an experienced team that involves animal caregivers, divers, veterinarian staff, and this staff is ready 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We started rescuing animals before the park was open in 1955. We received a call on a baby orphan manatee up here in the Miami Riviera that we went out and rescued and brought back. And a neat little story, this animal we named Mamie after then President Eisenhower's wife. And this was really not only our first rescue, but it was really our first opportunity to really teach people about these animals. We were one of the very first facilities to breed manatees in a zoological environment. We founded the milk that's currently used worldwide for the rehabilitation of young orphan manatees that are actually lost from their mother. We traveled to the Bahamas. In the case of Ilya, we traveled to New Jersey. And the water's pretty cold up there, which manatees really don't like. And this was a scenario where we went up there, rescued this animal, put her on a Coast Guard 130, flew her back to Miami, where she spent about 2 months in rehabilitation here at Miami Seaquarium, and then was eventually released to Biscayne Bay right behind us. And so this was a really great story of us and our rescue team being able to go and do and really do anything we need for these animals. We're often asked, what are these animals suffering from when they come to Miami Seaquarium? And when you talk about the manatees, there's really 3 big causes why they come into our facility. 1 is cold stress, 2 is boat strikes, and 3 is entanglement. There was an animal by the name of Venus that actually came into our facility, and her flipper was so entangled in fishing line that we unfortunately had to amputate it to save her life. But the great news is that after the surgery, she had a full recovery and was eventually released back into the wild. Off the coast of California this year, we had these mass strandings of these small California sea lion pups, and we don't really know what caused it. There's some thought that maybe the food supply was low, but they were actually being abandoned by their mothers. And so Seaquarium actually sent a group out to California to help in the rescue and rehabilitation of some of these animals. And recently, we actually brought 2 animals back from California. We sent our team out there, Monterey and Berkeley, who can actually be seen over at our sea lion area right now. And these are 2 animals that we now have provided permanent homes for as part of the unusual mortality event. We have a very important role in the community, and that's not only in our rescue and rehabilitation program, but also our education and conservation program. Well, it's very important to have places like Miami Seaquarium. I mean, without facilities such as ours, many people would never have a chance to see a manatee or a sea turtle or a sea lion. And it's hopefully through these experiences that they learn about these animals and understand how they can help these animals in the wild. And I'm a very fortunate individual to actually have the job that I have. I mean, it's a very rewarding job when we talk about rescue, rehabilitation, and release. I mean, we actually go out and find these animals, we'll rescue them when they're in a time of need, we'll bring them back into our facility, we'll nurture them back to health, and then eventually get to release them. And I mean, it's such a gratifying feeling, not just for myself, but our entire team here. I mean, we are committed to animals. That's what we are, that's who we are, and that's what we do today and tomorrow.
There's more. I love that video. I think it's sometimes better to see it. I think images speak more than 1,000 words. So we don't do this alone. We have some partners. For example, Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, the Sea Turtle Conservancy, the Manatee Rehabilitation Partnership, and the Sea to Shore Alliance. So Sea to Shore Alliance, it's actually very important and it's a key part of this whole system, if you want to call it, because they are the ones in charge of monitoring the manatees once they're out there in the wild. So raise your hand if you have an iPhone. Very good. Do you have a Find My Phone app? Yes? Well, do you think manatees have cell phones? No. But if you were to release a manatee, would you like to know how she or he is doing, if they're doing fine, if, I don't know, if they are in trouble? Yes? So that's why they put this special thing in the manatee. So where do you think this goes?
In the flipper.
In the flipper?
In the in the back.
In the paddle, very good. So in their tail, and this floats. And so this is Find My Manatee. Find My Manatee app. And so this works by sending a signal that they follow. And so there's one person that goes in a kayak and find them to make sure they're doing fine. So that's pretty cool, right? Kind of like Find My Manatee app. Okay, so we're going to talk about some milestones that I'm very proud to share. Okay, so as you already know, the first rescue manatee was Mimi, and it was an orphan, and that was in 1954, 1955. So that was the first rescue for Miami Seaquarium, but also the first opportunity to actually educate about manatees and what the threats they face. So we opened our doors in 1955, and it was the largest oceanarium in the whole US. So it was one of a kind. It only had 3 exhibits at the time, and it was the top deck dolphin pool, the reef tank facility, and the shark channel. We still have 2 of them, and they are still awesome. We have the top deck dolphin pool and the reef tank. And it's really cool. The reef tank, you can actually wear a huge helmet and swim and touch everything that lives there, so that's pretty awesome. So in 1976, it was the first park to have a manatee calf successfully born under its care. That is pretty huge. If you think of conservation, that is pretty big because, well, we don't have a mating program anymore, but back then it was very important because there's always a possibility that we can put some animals and make the gene pool bigger and larger so we can contribute to the wild population. In 1991, a group of short-fin pilot whales stranded near Key West. 6 of the whales were brought to Miami Seaquarium for rehab, and 2 were successfully released. In 2001, Venus, she is the one that you see in the video, where basically they had to amputate her, yes. But she was the first one to survive this and then go back into the wild. So that is pretty huge. In 2006, and that is over 10 years ago, so it's not like yesterday. A pregnant manatee named Ocean Reef was hit by a boat, and she was already in the late stages of her pregnancy. After her rescue, she became the first manatee to give birth to twins under human care. In 2012, deputy, a sea turtle rescued from extreme life-threatening injuries that included a hole in its shell. So, as we learned, their shell is very, very delicate, and they needed to be intact in order to survive. So the veterinarians created this really cool system where they invented kind of like, I don't know, like, well, they patched it, so they created a patch with marine glue and some surgical like material, and deputy began eating within 48 hours and then was successfully released. So that is pretty awesome. This sea turtle that had a hole in its shell then was released shortly after and perfectly fine and could be in the wild thriving. Then in 2015, as we saw in the video, there was a very sad and extreme situation called unusual mortality event. And so that means that a lot of California sea lion pups were found super malnourished, dehydrated, they were hungry, they were begging for food, but without their moms. So basically they were on their own and very, very hungry and very malnourished. Malnourished, what do you think it means? That they are skinny, they are weak, very good, exactly. And so it was so many of them that a lot of facilities around the country sent people over there to help. And so basically, same thing, they rescued the pups, they rehabilitated them, and then they released them. But if you're going to release a sea lion pup, do you want to name it? Make sure you know who he or she is? Yes, so they tag them, right? And so just in case they were found again, they would know it's the same one. So let's say Denise was released, and then she goes back into being malnourished, begging for food, bless you, enter the restaurants, and they know that Denise cannot survive out there in the wild. So when Denise is found for the third time, do you think the government says, oh yeah, send her back? No. They have to look for a permanent home for Denise. And that's what happened to Monterey and Berkeley. So we were very lucky to get them. And now they live very happily at Miami Seaquarium. What can we do to help sea turtles and manatees, and ultimately all wildlife? Clean up trash at the beach. So do you go to the beach often? Yes. Do you think you could pick 3 pieces of trash every time you go out there? Yes. Never approach sea turtles or manatees. If you see one, you can appreciate it from a safe distance. Do not buy sea turtle products. I mean, this is an important one. If there's no market for something, then basically they won't be selling it or trying to get things from the wild. Learn about them and teach others about them. This is very important. Turn off the lights on the beach during sea turtle nesting season. Follow boating rules. And reduce your carbon footprint. This is very important because this is how we prevent global warming. So we can use our bikes or eat less meat. So we don't have to be vegetarians or vegans, but we can definitely reduce the amount of meat we eat. We can start by doing that on Mondays or any day, and just having it for dinner, let's say. Very good. So now that you learned all about this, you are official Reef Rangers. I have a Reef Ranger pin for you, just like mine. But I also want to invite you to a challenge. And so show us what you will do to help manatees, manatees and sea turtles. So you can pledge as a reef ranger to pick up 3 pieces of trash when you go to the beach, to use a reusable water bottle instead of disposable ones. Raise your hand if you use plastic water bottles. Well, yeah, but if you multiply them, how many do you use each day? Be honest.
1 million.
Well, it is a big number, and so it's a very easy way to prevent all of that trash from entering a landfill or maybe getting into the ocean. So we can change our water bottles, our plastic water bottles, for a reusable water bottle, and that would be helping all of the animals out there a lot. Eat less meat products, or do you have any suggestion?
I have one over at the Village Green by the bathrooms. They have a water fountain that tells you, I don't know, 3 months ago, there were 15,000 bottles of water that we saved because it's a refillable.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
We need more of those.
Green bathrooms.
We need more of those.
They
So,
also have it in our school.
Do you? Great.
so instead of just getting little water bottles that you just drink and then throw away, bring your own with you all the time and then just refill it. Do you think you can do that?
Yes.
Be honest.
Yes.
Are you going to pick up trash?
Yes.
Be honest. Okay. Perfect. And so if you do this and take a picture, you can send it to our mail that is here, and I also have some tickets for you to take home. And we'll give you free park entrance. Only if you send your picture. You all get your Reef Ranger pins right now, but if you send your picture, picking up the trash or changing to a reusable water bottle, this is the challenge, okay?
Is that just for children, or we get a free pass?
You can be a Reef Ranger too, definitely. Yeah, we welcome Reef Rangers of all ages. Okay, so any questions?
Where are the other facilities for rehab or?
So one is Orlando, and then there's one in, do you know where?
Maui Park in Tampa.
Yeah, in Tampa. Thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay, so if you want, you can come get your pin and you can look at our artifacts. Thank you. Yes, you can. It is real. Okay. Well, you have to do the challenge. Send the picture here, and then I'll give you your ticket.
Wait, that's a mouse?
That is basically the flipper that you saw in the video that had to be amputated.
And you put it like with a robotic one?
No, we didn't. That is a really good question.
Like in
but-
dolphin tail, they put a plastic one.
Well, actually, the veterinarians are so good that they cut it in a way that the manatee wasn't harmed, and once the injury was healed, she went on her own.
Oh, so you didn't
Yes, definitely.
You cut an arm and then
Once it was healed, she was perfectly healthy and fine, and she could go.
so she didn't need this.
How did you get this off the tail?
So we get these from the government because sometimes they confiscate it, and that means that they find it in like some people's suitcases or in some people's homes or stuff like that.